It's a madhouse! Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 1972 Amicus anthology film, Asylum. Now, I've been watching some pretty bad movies lately, or at the very least some boring ones or mediocre ones, but regardless, Rotted Soul Nova Cascade chimed in with, man, you need a break. You should watch an Amicus anthology. And I went back and looked at one that was recommended by John Boyd, and he actually recommended two, one of which was Asylum. So I decided to give it a whirl. And what I found about this movie is I really, really enjoyed it, first of all, but it was a little bit peculiar. The binding storyline. Okay, well, first of all, it has a binding storyline, as pretty much all anthology films do, but it has four other segments in it. Frozen Fear, The Weird Tailor, Lucy Comes to Stay, and Mannequins of Horror. Now, the thing I thought was interesting about this one is the binding storyline is the one that really grabbed me. This starts out with Dr. Martin, played by Robert Powell, who is seeking employment at an asylum. And he's supposed to be meeting up with Dr. Starr, but instead he meets up with an associate of Dr. Starr, who informs him that his recent infirmed status, he's in a wheelchair, his leg is hurt, and the reason for that is never turn your back on a patient, and then goes on to explain that it was actually Dr. Starr himself that injured the associate, and that he is now kept upstairs as a patient. Too much work in a mental institution will drive anybody crazy. But Dr. Martin must now pass a test where he is sent upstairs to interview the patients that are locked away there and find out which one of them is Dr. Starr. And if he's able to guess correctly, then he gets the job. And the thing that makes it a little bit more twisty is the fact that Dr. Starr, upon his psychosis, has developed a unique personality, a different personality. So he has to find out all their stories and then come up with the conclusion. And immediately, that grabbed me. I loved it. I was on board for every minute of it, and as soon as the whole premise started laying itself out, I was really all over the place mentally trying to, guess which one it would be. And of course, not just confined to those four. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's, so on and so forth. And I'm not going to even guess what it is. I'm not even going to tell you what my guesses were here, just because these reviews are spoiler-free. And by the nature of spoiler-free, if I told you what I was guessing, then by logic, it would have to be not that one. And I don't want to ruin this for anybody. If you've never seen this film, I really highly recommend it. Go in fresh, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I know that I was. Whatever I was guessing, I was right, but it was still a very, very worthwhile journey. And the central storyline there grabbed me to the extent that the individual stories of the other ones, they were good, but they didn't grab me as much as the central storyline, which is unusual for an anthology film. Usually, that's just kind of a way to get the ground, tilled and the story going so that you can tell these other stories in the macabre. But although they were good, and I would dare say, some of them even had some great moments in them, did not do justice to the central storyline. So Frozen Fear basically has to do with a husband and wife that are arguing, and there's murderous intent in which a body is chopped up and tossed in a freezer and then comes back to haunt the murderer. That one actually had some pretty good creepy moments in it, and I really enjoyed it. It did get a little bit silly towards the end, but overall I did enjoy it. The Weird Tailor, this one I thought was kind of the standout segment. This one had Peter Cushing in it playing Mr. Smith, who is in search of a tailor to sew him a very special suit. And the tailor in this case is Bruno, played by Barry Morse. And Barry Morse, I thought, was actually the standout performance. He stood toe-to-toe with Peter Cushing, and I think actually elevated the storyline. He was a very sympathetic, meek, wonderful character on screen. But the situation for making this suit is very, very specific. First of all, Mr. Smith provides the fabric. He also has very clear, detailed instructions that it can only be sewn and worked upon within these particular hours, basically between midnight and 5 a.m., and then stop, and then, finish your work the next day. And Bruno being in a very difficult position as a tailor, his services haven't been sought after as much, is in dire straits financially. So this was a bit of a godsend for him, and he follows the instructions mostly. And then the reveal of what the suit is actually about comes back to haunt him. And of course, that's why Bruno is now in the mental institution being interviewed by Dr. Martin. Lucy Comes to Stay. This one I thought was okay, but the problem with it was as far as a twist goes, I had it figured out from the first pretty much 2 seconds of it starting. It was still entertaining. It was still well acted. It was still well done, but it wasn't much of a surprise. And then Mannequins of Horror. This one was very, very brief. And insofar as it's really only about half of a story, Dr. Martin is interviewing the patient, and the patient is revealing that he works on these robots and that he is trying to make them alive through the power of biology and robotics and concentration. But that only lasts for a few minutes and then bleeds its way into the main storyline towards its final conclusion. And overall, I thought it was good, but it's a difficult one to judge on its own merit just because it was so brief and it bled so much into the main storyline. So much so that the main storyline is not given its own name. It's just part of Mannequins of Horror. But everything about this movie I really, really enjoyed. I'm going to go and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot, high marks there. The intent, again, high marks there. I was captivated. There were some good creepy moments. I wasn't really, chilled to the bone scared by any of it. But Frozen in Fear in particular actually had one particular moment in it which really was unsettling and really worked well. So, the intention of there, keeping in mind that it is a 1972 movie and it doesn't really have the massively, terrifying, gory punch that some, of the more modern movies can. It did have to get by sensory boards and, so on, that was prevalent at the time. It's not going to be an absolute gore splatter fest that will keep me up at night. But regardless, I did find it very captivating. So high marks on the intention there. The acting, as always, stellar. I really love films of this period when you had stage actors and just grade A acting performances by artists, really, that are not afraid to do horror films. It's almost seen as a blessing and a challenge for them to be able to participate in this, and the performances that they have there shown through very, very well. And as far as the technical goes, I have no complaints. Some of the effects that were in here, a little bit cheesy, but then some of them had me kind of scratching my head. Well, how did they do that? That's actually pretty clever. So, as far as this, taking into account the period of the time and the fact that there was no CG, I really enjoyed it. And so overall, gives it a total of 78 out of 100 points. And as far as an Amicus anthology, I thought this was really high up there. This was right along par with Tales from the Crypt, which I considered until I watched this movie to be top tier. So would I recommend this one? Absolutely. If you love movies of this generation, I really can't recommend Asylum enough. If you love Amicus anthologies and you haven't seen it, watch it tonight. Stop what you're doing. Stop this review. Don't even finish watching it and go watch Asylum. So that should about do it. I really don't have a whole lot more to say on this one. It's a fantastic film and it should be watched by everybody. So that's my review of 1972's Asylum. Thank you very much for joining me here today. It means a lot to me. It really does. If you like these videos, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.